Well, welcome again to another edition of the i5 podcast. I'm here with my co-host Jim,
No.
and this is our first one of the new year. We hope you all had a good one, and hope you had a good Christmas as well. There's a lot happening, and we don't particularly care about Harry and Meghan. I mean, I don't, do you?
What? Of course I do. I lost sleep over that.
Oh,
Like, honestly, it's. I had uh, nightmares. Nightmares. It's absolutely atrocious what's happening. It
I had,
affects everyone on a personal level.
I know, I had to sleep with the light on.
I had to take 6 days of work.
did when you called in for the mental health aspects of it, did an ambulance get to you in time?
Yeah. And they also, behind the ambulance, there was like a Royal Army with instruments playing the anthem because it was that serious.
Mm. But
Oh, God.
yeah, we've got three people at the channel now, and I don't think any of us care about Harry and Meghan. There's been that much happening in the news, to be honest. We're going to cover some of it, but obviously the strikes will come a bit later because there's new developments with that all the time, and there's just been the expenses scandals dropped by Sky. So there are new developments that we're going to have to react to, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Today, something rather odd happened. Nigel Farage made an announcement, more or less a declaration. There's been huge expectation that he would run for political office. I don't know if he's really indicated he would do as such. Alex Balefield claimed in an off-air interview that Farage told him that he was going to run for political office in the UK. But there's no guarantee Farage actually said that, and with Alex Balefield, you've got to take a silo of salt when he says anything. It could have just been testing the idea to an audience.
I think that was the case, most likely.
He's never really said it directly. People were rather just hoping he would. People on the left hoped he would because he would split the Tory vote, and of course the Brexiteers hoped he would because he might rescue Brexit. But
Rescue Brexit. What does that mean? I know it's a bit off topic, but what does
that's on topic,
rescue
don't worry.
Brexit mean?
I think with Farage, keep it popular with the public so he can remain a hero and actually salvage it so the population accepts it and keep Britain from going back into the EU at all costs. Now, I'm not saying that Britain would go back into the EU. We'd certainly get slaughtered if we went back in. It'd make an example of us to show what happens when you leave. But that is one of the big fears that GB News actually plays on. You know, the failure of Brexit with the Tories, which is their new spin now, will take us back into the EU. So, you know, when it comes to rescuing Brexit, it could be different things. I would think logically it's make it financially work. You know, Britain being a bit being the globalized economic state's a bit of a myth now. So
Sorry to interrupt,
let's
but to
go on.
begin with, wasn't he one of the biggest advocates of Brexit? And
Yeah.
this went to shit. And now she's like, oh, I'm going to save Brexit. And we're like, oh, yeah, please, Daddy, come save Brexit. Is this actually a thing? Are people actually behind him after all the shit he said and done?
Yes. A lot of Brexiteer conservatives. We won't name and shame them, but a lot of them were really banking on him coming back, especially with the accusations that the Tories have gone a bit globalist in terms of links to the World Economic Forum. They'd put this faith that Nigel Farage would be some kind of savior and save the British political system.
God.
Yeah.
That says a lot about the severity of what's happening. If it reaches the point where you have to put your faith on Nigel, then you know shit has hit the fan.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's a con artist,
to say the least.
I mean, that was always a special interest. He was very good at arguing for Brexit because he was prepared to do it. He'd prepared for it his whole life, and then, you know, people like Boris Johnson, you know, usurped it from him and took it over. So he kind of lost relevance, but he is still seen as one of the original architects. You know, UKIP collapsed after the infamous Carl Benjamin UKIP run. I personally think that Nigel Farage engineered that, but that could be a video in itself. Then he went on to found the Brexit Party in opposition. And yeah, he has kind of lost a lot of relevance within the political scene itself in terms of running for elections. But he's gained it back going on GB News and his own YouTube channel, which gets a lot of views. So he's
I see he has quite a big traction in Twitter as well.
Yeah, he will do.
Although his videos are a bit weird, and by weird I mean like the way the camera pans sometimes is weird, but regardless, it's I find it surprising myself that he has that amount of traction. But then again, in Twitter, I'm not sure how much of that you can trust because there is always the bot side of things, and there are
very much so.
plenty of bots.
I mean, even on YouTube, you've got bots
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
subscribers
that
as
is
well.
true. That's very true.
I'm not going to name and shame, but there's been quite a few YouTube channels that went down to something like 240,000, and then in the space of a day, they just shot back up to 540,000 in the hope that no one noticed in that space of 24 hours there was a drop. So, and also what really exposes it is you'll have, again, I won't name and shame, it could be a video in itself, you'll see these personalities who have something like 140,000 Twitter followers, and then when they put a video of themselves up, people will they'll only get 800 views on that source material. So there are things that expose it. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if Nigel Farage had a lot of bots, but because he is still kind of an icon back from when he was at UKIP, it wouldn't surprise me if that was actually legit. And to be honest, usually Jim and I wouldn't really cover this topic, except for the fact that Nigel Farage really was one of the original architects of Brexit. So it's quite significant that he's kind of spun his view of it. Instead of just blindly supporting it all the way through like he has done for the past year and a half, I think he's seeing the writing on the walls, and he's starting to say, well, this isn't how I would have done Brexit. And he said word for word the Tories have a majority, and then, paraphrasing, they've more or less cocked it up. So now he's blaming them for Brexit failing.
I mean, from what I've seen in Twitter, because I have been monitoring him for the past 2 weeks or so, he pretty much tries to play the role of opposition against everyone. He's critical of both sides.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason why maybe people follow him.
Yep.
Because he doesn't take a side. He tries to spin his own narrative, separating himself from both the Tories, who most people are very disappointed, and Labour, who most people don't trust, to create like a new side. But most of the stuff he says is crap, because the stuff he already did back in the day is the same stuff he pretty much is supposedly angry about today. So it's ironic, to say the least. And hilarious. And honestly, I just don't get how shameless he is.
Oh, no, totally. I mean,
but that goes for any politician that tries to run.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And I do think it's the coward's way out. He knows he's got nothing to offer this time in an election, and he's backing out to keep a better gig. Just to go into the backdrop of why I think this announcement has come, basically the announcement that he's not going to run for any political office in 2024, when statably he was setting the scene up to do so, and there was huge demand for him to do so. In recent weeks, there's been some developments which have really put the writing on the wall, that whatever you want to define Brexit as, Britain's leaving of the EU has pretty much cost it a lot of money. The first one which summed it up was what was called a Brexit benefit. The Tories tried to control the language of this one, not calling it a massive success. It's the recent trade deal that was bragged about, which brings in £1 million over 5 years via selling pork products to South Korea. Unfortunately, despite how unimpressive that actually is, I don't even think that would cover the expense accounts of 2 or 3 MPs for the year. It's humbled even more by the fact that South Korea opened up its restrictions that it had previously in relation to pandemics, so it can now sell to the EU anyway, and has begun doing so. So it's not even a Brexit bonus, because if we were in the EU, we'd be making more money off of them. And the even bigger development is it's also been humbled by the recent report that has shown Britain has lost 40 billion in taxes, as a direct result of Brexit. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this announcement to bail out of running for political office has come alongside that. Just to add a bit more background to this and how this has been building up more or less over the past year, starting with Johnson's hard Brexit. Even before this, just before Christmas, businesses were complaining at how much money they were losing as a result of Brexit, claiming that EU countries won't even entertain the notion of working with them, mainly because of the bureaucratic processes involved. There was an exchange, for example, between a wine importer and Jacob Rees-Mogg on Question Time, which really highlighted the failures of government to set up any kind of effective replacement legislation that would facilitate trading. And again, that's industries losing money. The recent failed deal with New Zealand, which left British farmers at a disadvantage. New Zealand, who are also prioritising trade, again, with the EU, America and China, because these are just bigger markets than Britain. The first Brexit trade deal with Australia also saw Britain gaining very little except for large amounts of sewage being poured into our rivers. And finally, just lastly, we have the bill getting through Parliament which wants to deregulate business laws and take away hard-won rights like maternity leave, holiday pay, the concept of weekends being days off in some fields, amongst other things. There are lots of these in there, and again, there's no British legislation to replace them and make them law. So it's basically Jacob Rees-Mogg with his anti-union sentiment and anti-workers' rights sentiment using leaving the EU to get rid of these, because previously they were in EU law. These are just some of the things that have accumulated and made it more clear.
At the same time, I did hear that there was an experiment about 4-day weeks here in Britain. I think it was London from some companies. Now, I'm not sure if these companies were based in London, but I don't believe in a scenario where people were like the politicians try to abolish like the weekends as day offs and paid holiday. I think people would revolt.
Yeah, it was happening now with all the strikes. You know, it's happening now with all the strikes. The 4-day weekend thing, I think that's in Europe, because some of the things that are in this bill, and the Tories have actually been advocating this publicly and discussing it in the House of Commons. What's disturbing is the bill's been written up and it's made it past some of the stages. I hope it doesn't get through either. I don't think it will. It's just the idea that they're trying to do it, you know, as an added thing to the actual failed trade deals that we've had this year. But even so, the population will revolt. But the consequence is, I think we can both agree, it would make Brexit even more unpopular. The fact that they've tried to get this through.
Yeah.
Because it's facilitated it. And I just bring those trade deals up as the backdrop of what I think has led to Nigel Farage seeing this as a sinking ship. So now he's had to respin it and say, well, this is the Tories' fault.
Well, the whole fucking economy is a sinking ship.
Yeah.
And he's partially responsible for it. So
very much so. He's one of the original architects.
And now she's coming to be like, oh, I'm the savior. I know how the way out of this mess. But I'm surprised people actually forgot about all this shit and they're behind him now. Well, not all of them, but some of them.
Well, yeah, because he can just ignore it and respin. I mean, to be more specific. So in relation to why... That's why I think he's made this recent declaration that he won't be running. Because he knows it's a lost cause. And, you know, now we'll go into the analysis of, you know, the specific reasons. So I personally think this is a large contributor. While there are a few reasons why he wouldn't do it, run for political office, let's start with an obvious one. He'll be on a lot of money at GB News. He's one of their main stars, and he's also, you know, he's one of the pillars of the channel. That will give him a sense of self-importance, and it's pretty sweet to be an opposition commentator, not offering any solutions or policies that he would have to offer if he ran for office, and simultaneously getting paid to do it. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, opposition is the easiest job in the world. All you have to do is say no. Yeah. You add just salt and pepper and academic bullshit to make yourself sound important, and there you go, there you have it. Yeah. I mean, if up to a point you know what you're doing is wrong when you do it, then you know how wrong the strategies the other people are trying to pull off are. So it's easy for you to comment and tear them down. Yeah. But it's all just pretentious, considering it's all pretentious if your actions were equally as bad, which is the case here. But yeah, in general, one reason is, as you mentioned, the economic aspect of it. There's a lot of money, as you mentioned, in the table for him to just say nah. And I believe as I said before, opposition is the easiest job in the world. All you have to do is say no, disagree with everyone, and boom, there you go, there you have it.
It's even easier when you're not even in an opposition party. You're just in a TV studio being a loudmouth.
Yeah, exactly. She's not part of the parliament, which means he's not under any pressure. Like, what I mean is, usually if you're part of the parliament and you have your eyes into a certain position in there, you need to do favors and stuff, which means that your opinion, if you ever get to do interviews, needs to be filtered. In his case, she doesn't have to do that stuff because I don't believe at this point he aims in any particular position. I believe it's just he's just trying to be opposed to everyone, and he will try to go for a position in the Tories once Sunak falls, because apart from Sunak and Boris at the moment, we don't have anyone else, do we?
No. But I'm not sure that Nigel Farage would want to go in the Conservatives. Just because he's criticised them so much, I'm not sure they would have him.
Yeah, that's the point, though. because here's what happens: the public still doesn't trust Labour
Mm.
and is very, very angry with the Tories. So he will either create his own sort of party, which I'm not sure if it's possible, but
He could run as an independent.
yeah, exactly. So either he'll create his own party or run independent with his own group,
Or just himself as a brand.
yeah, or he might twist around and be like, right, I'm gonna go to the conservatories, kick the bad people out, bring the good people in to restore faith and do shit that way, which I think is highly unlikely. I think
Very, yeah.
I think as you mentioned, the most probable scenario is that at some point once the two sides collapse, he will go in and run independent. Well, I don't see that happening anytime soon at the same time.
A lot of people wanted him to join the current outsider party, but he seems to not really want to join parties where he's not the leader. Because that actually goes into the next thing I was going to say, is just an extension of the previous one. There's actually no guarantee that Farage would win a constituency. We've already, went into who would he actually run for. He has kind of locked himself out the Conservatives with all the stuff he's been saying about them, even though he's very close to Brexiteers like Jacob Rees-Mogg. But he doesn't seem to also, like I said before, he doesn't seem to not like being the leader of a party. He doesn't seem to like not being a leader of a party. He could run as an independent, he wouldn't be the first. But the thing is, running for an election could be quite disastrous for him. For example, he'd be a target for the press, he'd be held to scrutiny. Stuff could come out about him, as he would be a target, and it could be exposed to a national audience, not just his actual personal audience. Such as his infamous "up the raw" comment, in reference to up the IRA. Somebody basically paid him to do one of these little mobile phone cliplets, and they got him to say "up the raw," and it was exposed on an Irish news station with Claire Byrne, which was really funny. He basically looked like one of my rats when it gets caught in the biscuit tin when he had to face up to that. But it could be, it could be damaging. Blaming the Conservatives after the thing is as well a big hypocritical thing. He's blaming the Conservatives, saying they fucked up Brexit because they've got a majority and all of that. He actually made a deal with Boris Johnson before the election to not really challenge any Tory constituencies in exchange for Boris Johnson getting as hard a Brexit as possible. The Brexit we have now, as a result of that, he still had a hand in.
Yeah, he did.
And
it still is a
backed to
mess.
it.
Like, we had, how many years ago when Brexit happened? Like 5, 6? Wasn't it like 2015 or 16?
2016.
2016. So that's
Yeah.
like 7 years ago. Well,
Yeah.
this is the 7th year.
And
It
there were
still is a mess.
Yeah, and we had quite a few years before we actually left. So there was a long time to get trades in place. But the thing was, how really do you have a strong position when other countries know these guys are leaving the EU, they're going to be desperate, just wait for them to be out the EU when they're completely desperate, and then we can take advantage of them, which has gone on to happen. America told us that they were going to move us to the back of the queue. The EU said there'd be more legislation. Nigel Farage only ever said, really, that there'd be less red tape, and the EU immediately countered that, saying, no, what you'll find is there'll be more red tape if you leave.
Yeah.
He's said a lot. One thing I do want to say, though, I'm not accusing him of saying far-right extremist rhetoric, because GB News is an Ofcom regulated channel. They'd literally be shut down if they said things like that. So I'm not going to go into calling him far-right extremist. I think he is personally quite extreme with his views, but he's never publicly said anything that overt, because again, GB News Ofcom regulated, they'd shut it down if it was. It's the same with Piers Morgan Uncensored. It's not uncensored because it's regulated by Ofcom. But I'm not saying he said racist things like the N-word or anything like that, but I think he's probably said a lot of things on GB News which wouldn't really be acceptable to the electorate, especially in relation to immigrants crossing over in the boats. And I think that would come back to haunt him as well.
Yeah, actually, that's a good reason on its own, because usually when you go into political campaigns, isn't it like common practice for like the opposing sides to dig up dirt for one another and use that against them on the debates?
Well, look at what happened to Carl Benjamin, yeah. Absolutely. They dug up his entire internet past. Now, a lot of people might roll their eyes saying, oh, why are you talking about Carl Benjamin? It's just Carl Benjamin was arguably part of the reason why, I would argue he was, part of the reason why UKIP was destroyed as a party. And
So, what was destroyed as a party there?
UKIP. Nigel Farage's original party before he hopped over to Brexit.
Right.
And
Didn't
I
know
think
that.
Oh yeah, Well, we can do a podcast sometime on it if you're interested.
Yeah.
Because it is quite fascinating, but just going back to Farage, it could be a similar situation where the same principles, people just go through Farage's past and are able to dismantle him.
Mm.
And just to finish off this segment, unless there's anything else you want to add in relation to this.
No, not really.
Just to finish this off, Farage currently has a sweet gig. If he runs, he would have to provide policies and solutions to fix the declared Tory mishandling of Brexit, and I don't think he has any. As we were saying before, it's easy to be in opposition where you are the opposing political party. It's even easier when you are a well-paid commentator on a news channel. You can just blame and complain about government in action with ambiguous rhetoric in his GB News studio and never have to provide any answers. I mean, just to sum up this segment, why give that up?
Exactly. There's no reason to give any of that up.
Mm.
In fact, he would take more risk attempting to get into a political position. Because if that fails, then he has nothing.
Yeah.
Only the relevance he can sort of drag along on his own via social medias like YouTube and Twitter, and that's about it.
Oh yeah, and let's be honest here, he will make a fortune on the lecturing scene. And I don't mean just at universities, I mean there will be organisations that will bring him in and pay him a lot just to come and make speeches about this, and he will do tours on it just from this platform. It's what most prime ministers do when they leave, and again, he won't want to give that up or risk that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
There's one thing he has said, and I need to be careful how I define this, because this is what the Conservative commentators that back him are latching onto to cope with why he's, let them down. He claims that the media would destroy him. Now, we've just argued that they would, but his claim was they would lie about him, and they would assassinate his character, and they would, the way Carl Benjamin said he was assassinated by the media, and there may have been some truth to that in relation to Carl Benjamin. Again, that's another video entirely. It's just we're seeing recurring themes from that election with Nigel Farage's statement here is all. I'm not so sure. There is enough to sink him legitimately in any election bid with the stuff he's previously said in his proven hypocrisy. He's said a lot of things, and like I said, I think he knows it. This is just to appease the conservative Brexit crowd and give them something to bite onto, as a lot of them really were hoping he would come back into politics.
But what exactly?
The idea that he's just saying that the media would have conspiracy theories about him and would lie about him and completely assassinate him.
I think it's more of a deflection at this point. Like, again, being in the position, it's so easy to say no and shift the blame. It's the same thing here. No one likes the media at the end of the day.
No one does.
Everyone knows that more than half the time media exaggerates the news or exaggerates some aspect of every single thing they report. So it's just so easy to deflect and say, I don't want to do this because the media will kill my character, when in reality he knows he's done shit in the past. That legit stuff that actually are worrying and would result in his character being killed, as he says, but it would be rightfully so. So I think that's more of an excuse, and the fear the fear is legit, but in this case I think the media would have an overwhelmingly amount of material on him. Yeah,
they wouldn't need to lie, really.
Exactly.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But here is a smart thing on that move. Is like, by saying that, he pretty much implies that every single thing bad you hear about him in the mainstream media is overblown and an exaggeration, as if he's done nothing wrong. Which says a lot about him and what he believes and how he sees himself in his mind.
From behind the scenes, he has engineered the Brexit we have now, that deal with Boris Johnson alone, to give him that majority. And he was the original architect of it. And I do agree it's a deflection. I do think, though, that conservative commentators who were really putting everything into this guy being the saviour that would lift Brexit into the heavens, they're just latching onto this, because I think that to say what we're saying, it's a deflection, it's pretty much an admission that Brexit has failed. Because he's having to deflect, he's trying to distance himself from it now, saying, oh no, it's the Tories' fault that it's failed, it's not mine. But I'm not going anywhere near this train wreck. What can I say? The media would get me. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, if he's damning the very same Brexit he helped organize, then it's pretty much confirmed that it's a failure. Yeah. I mean, we don't need him confirming it. can see what's happening with the economy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, the extra regulations. I was speaking with friends that they wanted to come to study and live in England, and it's such a massive fucking pain in the butt just because of Brexit. And this is only one aspect of it.
And
As you mentioned, businesses, the red tape with trading and everything. Yeah, it's a total shit show.
I mean, universities used to make a fortune from European students coming to this country.
Yeah, especially from Asia.
I think this is going to sound horrible, but just hear me out. He's said enough for his audience to keep believing and deluding themselves with that statement. I don't mean the national electorate, I mean his personal fan base who want to keep believing that he can save them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
With that comment, and I think that's what that was for. Another one that's been said a few times. Now, I'm not sure how much truth there is to this. I think it's what we've been saying. He's just a career politician that looks out for himself, and he'll make deals with anyone to keep influence and get Brexit through, hence the deal with Johnson. There have been accusations that Farage has controlled opposition for the Tories, the way he's effectively killed off his own party on a number of occasions. I personally don't see it. I do believe, again, he's made deals in the past, and this could be another one. He has people like Jacob Rees-Mogg on his Talking Pints show quite a bit, and it could be another deal that he's made with the Tories, who are expecting a battering in this election. Farage would have to run in a Conservative constituency, or a Conservative-leaning constituency, and whether he's with a party or on his own, that might be harmful to a Tory election plan, especially if he took charge of a party or even just joined it. So this could just be another deal he's made with the Tories. Say, and this is just hypothetical mind, I don't know this. It could just be he said, look, I'll not run and be a problem for you in the election. Could you throw a few of your MPs on my GB News show?
Yeah, it's not unlikely.
It's how the Westminster lobby works. They do transactional favours like that all the time.
Yeah, it's actually very likely, because if he can see the party scrambling, so it would be a good time for him to attempt to jump on it.
Oh yeah.
Excluding, like, ignoring all the reasons we pretty much mentioned earlier why he wouldn't want to do that. Another one might be a deal he's made.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say is British news is normally not very popular internationally, unless there's a scandal, like there has been this past year. We've had Johnson's legacy, we've had his resignation, we've had the Liz Truss debacle, we've had Rishi Sunak getting in without a mandate. The British government and the Westminster bubble last year, it's 2023, 2022, it's been a joke. I mean, Britain's been the laughingstock because of this. But for the press, well, while some of them haven't really got the views necessary, a lot of international commentators who've been laughing at the British press, they've been making a fortune off of it. And because Nigel Farage has an international brand, you know, he's very popular in America. You frequently see him on Fox News with Tucker Carlson. And you see him on, I don't know if you see him on Sky News Australia as much, but I can't believe that he'd be on there. He's very popular in the international conservative scene. He's an icon to them. With the way that the British government's been a complete mess over 2022, the international eye was on British politics, also with the Queen's death. So he probably wants to stay in the media because he probably made a lot of money from that, you know, commentating on it.
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't aware that being a media commentator and guest actually has that big of an income.
Oh yeah, it's massive.
Yeah.
The Sky News expense accounts, which I was going through, some of the MPs made quite a bit, in the thousands, just for appearing on the show. I'm sure there's been amounts like 10 to 10 grand for MPs just going onto a newspaper and writing an article. A lot of money thrown around.
That's worrying.
Very. But beyond that, I don't really have anything really more to say on it, other than after the analysis, I think we can pretty much take Nigel Farage's refusal to go into Brexit to run for office on a two-pointed front. One is he doesn't want to give up his cushy job at GB News, and two, I think it's because he knows Brexit's turned out to be a train wreck, and he doesn't want to have any official influence over it anymore, more than he already has. And
it's just easy to damning an already damned train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you were the one that caused it. Yeah. Well, partially, at least.
Oh, I think it's safe to say he was a significant factor in
it. Yeah.
To be honest, I don't really have much left to say on it.
No, I think we analyzed it as much as we could, and I personally said everything I had to say on the matter.
Yep, same here. Oh, and with that, guys, thank you for joining us. We hope that you found it enlightening. If you agree or disagree, don't hesitate to leave a comment, a like, or a dislike. Don't forget to ring the little bell and subscribe. And we hope you have a nice start to the year.
All the best, and see you on the next one.
Yep. Bye, guys.